Hello and welcome to the Outdoor Recreation Council of BC September webinar. My name is Ryan Stewart and I am hosting today's webinar. I'm going to give folks a few minutes to log in, and while they do that, I'd love to know who's out there. The format of these webinars is such that you can see the panelists, but we can't see everybody else that's out there. And so I would like to invite you to jump into the chat and add your name, where you're logging in from, and maybe share your favorite place to recreate in the fall. So for me, I live in the Comox Valley on Vancouver Island. I like an urban trail in Courtenay that wanders along Arden Creek. It's a great place to watch spawning salmon in the fall at this time of year and all the ecology and life that goes with it. I'm going to add that into the chat here. Just give me a second, but feel free to jump in and do the same. When you do, make sure that you check in there under who you're addressing it to, that it's for everybody. I've made that mistake a few times. And here's my response. And while everybody else is adding theirs in there, I'll say that I'll give you a little background on today's webinar. We have two guests with us, and they'll be sharing some river stewardship projects that they're involved with. We'll leave lots of time for questions. You can pop any that you have into the Q&A at any time. Someone might answer them during the webinar, but otherwise we'll have a dedicated section at the end for answering those questions. I'll also mention that we are recording, and we will email the recording along with any takeaways, additional resources and links, things like that later this week. We'll wrap things up around 1 o'clock. And I think with that, we might get started. So let me just share my screen. All right. Well, hello again. My name is Ryan Stewart, and I work with community engagement with the ORCBC. That includes organizing and hosting our webinars. And today's webinar's theme is Everyone is a River Steward. Today we're going to learn why that statement is true and how anyone or any group that's recreating out there should be thinking about water stewardship. There's a long tradition of caring about rivers in BC. Indigenous people have been caretakers for forever. That's true where I am today. I want to take a moment to acknowledge that I'm grateful to live, work, and play on the ancestral territory of the Comox First Nation. Their traditional way of life was intimately connected to the flows, the seasonal flows of the Puntledge River. Archaeologists have mapped more than 300 fish traps in the estuary that date back at least 1,800 years. The river is still an important piece for recreation in the community, for whitewater paddling and lazy tubing in the summer, fishing at this time of year, bird watching year-round. On the weekend, the community celebrated the river's importance with a family watershed day. It's part of BC Rivers Day festivities, and so is this webinar. The official BC Rivers Day is this Saturday, September 28th, and the ORC was a founding partner of BC Rivers Day 45 years ago. BC Rivers Day was the model that led to the World Rivers Day, which is celebrated in 100 countries on 6 continents. It's one of the world's largest environmental celebrations. You can find a full list of BC River Day events on our website, orcbc.ca. It's underneath the events, BC Rivers Day tab there. I'll pop a link into the chat here in a moment too. There are more than 50 events happening across the province. Many are on the big day this Saturday, but there are others happening throughout the week and after this weekend too. And that's kind of the point of today's webinar. We should be river stewards all the time. I'd like to take a moment here to thank our sponsors. BC Rivers Day and this webinar are made possible by the financial support of Fortis BC and the BC License Plate Program. Big thanks to them and everyone else that supports BC Rivers Day and the ORCBC. As a nonprofit representing nonprofits, the Outdoor Recreation Council of BC relies on grants and donations from people like you. We believe our work makes a difference. We're the only organization that advocates for the entire outdoor recreation sector in the province. We represent clubs and associations in just about every outdoor recreation activity that you can think of, from birding to rock hounding, fishing and hunting, self-propelled and motorized. Altogether, we speak for about 100,000 British Columbians. We advocate for recreation, we build skills and capacity, and membership in the ORCBC includes many perks, including our newest benefit, free legal and grant writing advice. You can find out more about that and everything else we do at orcbc.ca. And there's a button on the homepage for making a donation, including donating to the Outdoor Recreation Fund of BC. This is a pool of money that is granted to recreation projects across the province every year. Timing for our next grant intake will be announced very soon. Okay, on to today's webinar. Here's the agenda. I'll introduce our two guests. They'll make their presentations, and then we'll have a dedicated question and answer session. If you have any questions during the webinar, please put them in the Q&A function. One of our guests might answer them directly. Otherwise, I'll do my best to ask them during the Q&A period. If I miss any, I apologize in advance. We'll wrap things up around 1 p.m. Pacific time. And immediately following the webinar, a super short survey will pop up in your web browser. Please stick around to fill it out. It helps us do a better job with these webinars and cover topics that you want to learn about. Okay, we have two guests with us today. Justine Nelson is the Executive Director of the Rivershed Society of BC, a group working to restore the Fraser River's 34 riversheds. Neil Fletcher is the Director of Conservation Stewardship for the BC Wildlife Federation. They work on many different water-related projects, including building analog beaver dams, which he's going to tell us more about. Thank you both for being here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to pass it over to Neil to take us away.
There we go. Lots of buttons to press. Okay,
Yeah.
so thank you, Ryan, for the introduction, and thank you, everyone, for taking time out of your day to take a moment to celebrate rivers and water and all the good things that come from that. Yeah, I put this presentation together specifically for this event. I was asked to tie in as much as I could river stewards and the various groups that support uh, watershed work around the province, including a lot of recreational advocates that also dabble in conservation and stewardship. Here I have a photo of both some of my staff as well as Nuayach Indian Band, who joined us on several builds of beaver dam analog work last year. But yeah, I mean, this site had lots of different groups coming and lots of interest in the work we were doing, and I'll talk a bit about that. So what I'm going to cover today is a few different ways that we are supporting river and stream stewardship, as well as wetland work and various techniques to do that, and then weaving in stories of people that are doing this great work. So first of all, I just wanted to say, technically, water is a responsibility of the province of BC. But as you may all be aware, the province can't do it alone, for one. And then two, the environment is heavily underfunded in, I think, many nonprofits' opinions, as not really being a priority of government often. Now, not to say that there are some amazing people that work for the province and do great work, and we certainly love to work with them and appreciate their time and support, but we can't expect uh, all stewardship and conservation to fall out of a provincial staff member. Often they're just overworked and unable to really take on a lot of these projects. So what does that leave us with? That leaves us with everyone else who needs to support and become a steward of watersheds. So we really need to work together and to collaborate, to enable good conservation work to happen. And there are many different ways people get involved in doing stewardship work. Each of these individuals has a story to tell and has a passion for caring for water, caring and really supporting good work from happening. And passion is likely where almost each of these individuals starts when it comes to doing work. And I have to say, once you get involved in a project, it's really hard to peel yourself away. It's going to be one of the most rewarding things you do in your life is to engage in some form of stewardship. I'll start with foreshore cleanups. We have been working, had the benefit of working with both some staff as well as volunteers on doing a large scale cleanup in the Fraser itself, in the lower Fraser. This is our team last year. We had 3 sessions of hiring temporary staff to help us do a large tidal marsh cleanup. In one of their more recent rounds, they collected over 22 tons of of uh, of debris. And here's the locations where they're collecting that debris. In the middle here, we see Delta. So all along both the river and I think that's Mud Bay down below there. But you can see that they went everywhere. Places that were hard to reach, boat access often. And what I really wanted to do is provide kudos to who gave us this idea, which is the Delta Rodner Rod and Gun Club. They would volunteer once a year and get out on a boat and clean up the areas that they like to waterfowl hunt in and to fish in, and really do care about the environment around them. And so they were instrumental in helping us set up our staff, letting us know what locations to access, where we could launch boats from, and so played a very integral role into the success of this project. Next, I'll just talk about health assessments. Before you start doing any work, it's good to know what the health of the site is. And this takes some time. This takes, to understand where we should be prioritizing our resources and doing work. So some of the work that BC Wildlife Federation engages in is doing project scoping or looking at sites where there might be potential impacts. Here's an example of road impact assessments. We do these up in the north right now, and where we're looking for where streams are crossing roads and understanding what kind of impact that might be having on adjacent wetland habitat. Here's Kat and Nadia. They're 2 of our staff who are out in the field enjoying the day, doing road intersect assessments as well as inventorying various wetlands around the province. We were lucky. Here's another link. We were connected with Jesse Lausen, who's with the Spruce City Wildlife Association up in Prince George. They were very keen to hear about the work we were doing, offered to volunteer to help us site scope and look at sites where streams and wetlands might be intersected by roads. At the same time, Jesse gave us a tour of work that they are doing. To enhance salmon habitat. And so Jesse, along with the Spruce City Wildlife Association, take care of a hatchery, like many other great hatcheries that often run on volunteers and do really great work to return salmon back to some of our stream systems. So Jesse is an avid hunter, an avid angler, and trapper, and just really, really passionate about the work that they do. So next I have is fish habitat restoration. I'm going to go back to Jesse and talk about one of Jesse's projects, which is to improve a channel that is up near Cottonwood Island on the main stem of the Fraser, and it's this channel dries out too quickly and becomes anoxic for fish. And so this year, the plan is to dredge parts of that channel to improve it for fish habitat right in the community of Prince George. And passion has really driven this project forward, and BC Wildlife Federation has become a partner, mostly on a financial end, to support this project to carry on. And yeah, so it should be really great. It's going to be happening in the next couple weeks. Here's a part of that channel, and Jesse walking it. You can see it dries out quite a bit, and it can be improved for fish habitat. Another story around fish habitat that I wanted to share was Keegan Cassidy from the North Shore, Vancouver, North Vancouver. Keegan grew up fishing. on this creek, this is Mosquito Creek, and realized as an adult, looking back at it, how it was uh, degraded. And Keegan's day job is a mortgage broker, but growing up fishing, he saw the value in it, and he's now the president of the North Shore Streamkeeper Society, and has single-handedly been restoring Mosquito Creek, an urban creek in North Vancouver, and really adding a lot of complexity to this structurally starved uh, creek. So here's some of the creek beforehand, and the photo on the right here, you can see how much logs and boulders were brought in to add that complexity. Now I can say that pink and other salmon are coming in and using the habitat as designed. Okay, next we have wetland restoration. This is something that I'm quite familiar with. This is sort of where I started some of the work that I've done at the BC Wildlife Federation. Here we have a private land owner who has offered some of their land to bring back habitat for wildlife. In the photo here, you'll see Birch, who's one of our staff, who's building their skill sets up to take on these projects and to design and support these. In addition, we worked with some local stewardship organizations as well to make sure this project was successful. Here's another example. This is in the Lower Mainland near Abbotsford. This is Becky. Becky also on our team. And here we are restoring a wetland on agricultural land where the landowners are keen to support wildlife habitat as part of that. A big part of wetland stewardship is landowners, working with landowners who have parcels of land and are willing to contribute some of it back to the environment on behalf of wildlife. So yeah, really important and people to be partnering with are landowners. Um, here's a Here's a wetland you can see here, and if you're looking closely, you'll notice that there are some people that have taken their ATVs and have enjoyed their time, but have left a bit of damage at the site as well as cattle access too. So this would have been some mud bogging somebody is doing, spinning their wheels around in this wetland. But ATVs can be used for good purposes too, like helping to build fences to protect these wetlands from further degradation. This is Dave Carlton. He's a member of our BC Wildlife Federation, and here he is using an ATV for good use and helping to fence off an area. It would have been really hard work without Dave supporting this, and really it's passion that's driving these individuals. Dave, longtime hunter, angler, and just loves getting involved in wildlife projects. This is Charlie Dingbing. Charlie is the president of a local Kamloops ATV club, and Charlie came to one of our wetlands institutes. It's a workshop we host to learn how to restore wetlands where they like to ride. And as far as I understand, they've been working on building some wetlands up in the Lac du Bois recreational area to support spadefoot toad and other species at risk that breed and live near these recreational sites. So yeah, stewardship comes in all shapes and sizes, and I think there's a tremendous opportunity for recreationalists to play a role and to see their role in that. Here's another example of a ATV club. This is the Salmo Valley Seniors ATV Club. We partnered with them on a workshop a number of years ago, but one of the things that they were doing was putting signage up around where they like to recreate. And part of that is to build social credit to support the work they're doing, but also because they really do care about the environment and the visual quality of what they're seeing out there. So they want to be able to carry on doing ATV, like riding their ATVs on trails, and want to be seen as part of the solution in terms of safeguarding wetlands and streams. So if you're interested in wetland restoration or stream restoration, we do run a number of workshops. I'm actually at one today. This afternoon, I'll be out in the field and we'll be designing a wetland with a group of people. But yeah, BC Wildlife Federation, feel free to check out our website and look for opportunities for training. Beaver dam analogs, I mentioned I'd talk about these. These are basically where we build like what beavers would do, build beaver dams, mimicking how they would create habitat. Beaver dam analogs are relatively new to BC, but have been around Washington and Oregon and other jurisdictions for a number of years. Over the last few years, we've had a pillar of trying to build over 100 of these in the province, monitor their effectiveness, figure out the policy on how we're supposed to be able to put these into the ground, and basically store more water to help support moderating of flooding events, as well as to help improve impacts and mitigate impacts from fire. But these are also really helpful for supporting fish habitat as well. And ideally, we'll bring beaver back onto the landscape where then they can work 24 hours a day and support the work that we're doing. We did a couple of weeks ago achieve our 100th beaver dam analog in the last 2 years, and our team is really busy this week continuing on some of that work. It's hard work. It takes a lot of labor. I can tell you that this team is dirty. The rental trucks we borrow are in pretty interesting condition by the end of the field season, but it requires people that have access to chainsaws, ATVs, and other skill sets. It can really help this project. So we have been working with a number of uh, other groups that have ATVs or chainsaw skills on these projects, and that can help these projects along. Here's somebody who's actually in the crowd today, David Oliver, who has really helped out at one of our projects in the East Kootenays, where David was helping carry woody material, to our wetland sites and supporting our work. So there's definitely opportunity to get involved and engaged in these, and the transformation of these sites is quite something else. Lastly, nest boxes. Nest boxes are an easy way to be a steward. This is Brian and Ann. They are part of the Burnaby Lakes Parks Association. They had a nest box program that they would run at Burnaby Lake, which was so successful that they had the highest return of wood ducks of anywhere else in the Lower Mainland because of the work that they did, both installing and checking and monitoring that, and then engaging community along the way. Okay, this is the final part, collaboration, really important. I know it's some of the questions that Ryan might be asking us later. Collaboration is really critical to getting projects done and working with others. And at the BC Wildlife Federation, if you're interested, we do have a number of qualified professionals that are interested in helping advance conservation and stewardship opportunities. So really interested to hear how we can work with you or support your projects. And yeah, thanks very much for your time. I appreciate the opportunity to speak, and looking forward to hearing Justine and questions.
Thanks, Neil. So just touching on that collaboration piece, I mean, you mentioned a few examples there, like the BC Wildlife Federation, it can provide support in a few different ways, I kind of gather. Can you just touch briefly on what those different ways can look like?
Yeah, so I mean, I think at the start it's just hearing about what is it somebody interested in. I mean, we can certainly do some scoping or talk about their project or idea. That's kind of easy entry point. We do have, as I mentioned, qualified professionals, which in this new world that we live in, relying on qualified professionals on projects can be important. Sometimes it can be required to doing some of this work in and around streams. We do have a team that does that. They are sometimes fully subscribed, so we do need some runway time to know if there's a project coming up and know how we can help out. But I think we're always open to supporting those types of projects where there's good alignment, or at least providing advice to groups that are thinking of getting something off the ground.
And it sounded like maybe some opportunities for financial support for some projects.
Yeah, I mean the funding we do run on grants and donations as well. So I think we have been in the past had some funding come through where we've been able to share and support their groups through that funding. So we can either partner on grant writing, or there might be future opportunities. The one year we were able to support the enhancement of 25 docks around the project, and but that came from a provincial source, and then we needed to find out what kind of docks we were going to use, and we actually worked with a lot of the rec sites, BC and BC parks, to identify locations to make access to water more accessible to more people.
All right. And is local BC Wildlife Federation members the best source to kind of touch base with initially, or more the provincial organization itself?
I mean, it depends. I can't speak on behalf of every club we have. Each club's going to be a little different in terms of its makeup. Some are really active in this role and would be really helpful to reach out to. We're always available to, if it's something local, if you're reaching our head office, we might redirect you to a club as well. But we can also just sort of scope and see what opportunities that we can provide support or tie you into our local club.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Neil. I appreciate it. All right, let's move things over to Justine from the Rivershed Society of BC. Justine, tell us a little bit more about how your work connects recreation and what all you're doing as well.
Thanks, Ryan. And it's always great to hear Neil speak. So thank you for inviting me to be a part of this conversation. I don't have slides, so you just get to look at my face for this talk. And I apologize in advance because I do have a cold, so I'm hoping that won't impact the presentation too much. I'm calling in from my home on the unceded territory of the Matsqui First Nation, right along the Fraser River in what is today known as Abbotsford. So Rivershed works across the entire Fraser watershed, and we have a vision of a resilient watershed where salmon, people, and economies can flourish together. And one of the things that we've learned is that outdoor recreation is tied to how that vision is achieved. So I want to start with a simple idea. Everyone is part of a watershed, and those who spend time outdoors are deeply connected to those rivers and those watersheds, whether they ever swim, paddle, or fish. Rivers flow through every landscape where we recreate. They shape the valleys we hike through. They cut across the roads and trails we ride on. They sustain the wetlands and forests that make our favorite places alive. For some, that connection is obvious. Paddling a river, casting a line, camping along a shoreline. For others, it's more subtle, but no less real. Mountain bike clubs build small bridges across creeks. Dirt bikers and ATV riders cross wetlands and streams that feed into larger rivers. Hikers see seasonal flows carving channels across trails after a rain. And often the destination is a waterfall, lake, or a viewpoint shaped by water. All of these moments remind us that recreation activities are part of a river ecosystem, not separate from them. So at Rivershed, we see this every day in our programs. They bring people together on the water and in communities to build stronger relationships with the land and rivers that support us all. In our watershed workforce program, youth spend a day connecting with the watershed from a canoe or raft, and then spend a day working alongside experts such as biologists, elders, and local collaborators to restore tributaries. They hear from local experts about careers in watershed health, from restoration ecology to GIS mapping to environmental policy. Participants come away understanding that rivers aren't just a backdrop. They are living systems that sustain people, salmon, and economies. And they leave knowing that caring for them can be a meaningful and rewarding path of work. The recreation side of this program is where the relationship to the river or the watershed begins. Another example is our Foodlands Corridor Restoration Program, and this shows connection in a different way. So it's a collaborative effort with First Nations and agricultural landholders to restore portions of private land next to waterways in the Fraser watershed. We co-design the corridor sites, integrate traditional knowledge and language, and create local jobs through the work. It's intended to be an ethical space of engagement, a place where people who might not otherwise meet come together to develop a shared vision for restoration. One example is along the Sheshwayam or Salmon River, which is in what's today known as Langley in the Kwantlen and Katzie First Nation territory. We work with the Kwantlen First Nation on this project. And in this area, trails, farms, and paddling opportunities all connect. Restoration here, whether it's planting native vegetation, stabilizing banks, or improving habitat, supports fish and wildlife, while also making the places where people walk, paddle, and explore healthier and more resilient. It's a reminder that the way we move through a landscape and the health of the river running through it are deeply connected. Then the last one I'll share as an example is our watershed CPR dashboard. It's an interactive map that we've been developing that highlights restoration and protection projects across the Fraser watershed. It's meant to help communities see what's already happening, spark collaboration, and inspire more action. Because often what limits action isn't actually a lack of good ideas, it's a lack of shared understanding and connection to get those ideas moving. So the dashboard is one way that we make those connections visible. And so, for example, we could put a potential project on there that one of the recreation groups has as an idea to start it off, and or we could connect folks with others that are doing work in the same area through that project. So these programs all remind us that recreation and river health are deeply connected. And being a river steward can take many forms. For some, it's volunteering their time to help with restoration. Could be planting trees, removing invasive species, monitoring water quality. For others, it's supporting this work through donations or partnerships. And there are many, as we know, that are already quietly caring for the places that they love, maintaining trails, building bridges, planting trees, or simply modeling respect for the land and water. We know a lot of people are already doing this work and often without recognition. And we at Rivershed want to celebrate that and not add more pressure or guilt to do more. Because stewardship doesn't have to mean adding something new to your plate. It can be about seeing what you're already doing as part of a bigger system. We're in a moment where these connections matter more than ever. Watersheds like the Fraser are facing pressures from climate change, flooding, drought, wildfires, development, and habitat loss. And these are complex ecosystems. And when they're stressed, everything feels it. Fish populations decline, farms flood, drinking water becomes less reliable, recreation spaces are damaged or closed. But when rivers are healthy, they give back. They buffer us from floods and droughts. They nourish salmon that feed ecosystems and communities. They anchor our cultures and economies and identities. And they support the places where we find joy, adventure, and connection. So when we care for rivers, we're really caring for all of that. Anyone who spends time outdoors in British Columbia is part of a watershed. And if you're part of a watershed, you may already be part of the solution. So stewardship doesn't have to mean doing something new, as I've already said. It can be as simple as making a choice that reduces erosion or pollution where you recreate, talking with your club about habitat-friendly trail design, asking local governments or groups how recreation planning can align with watershed goals, or just taking a friend out to experience the beauty of the watershed or the river so they feel connected too. And if you want to do more, Rivershed and others are here to support that, whether it's joining an event, collaborating on a project, or contributing your voice or time or your resources. There's always a place in this work. So the next time you cross a creek, stand beside a wetland, or ride along a river, pause for a moment and consider the connection. Every one of us who recreates is part of these systems, and every one of us can choose to be a steward. And if you're inspired to do more, we'd love to connect. As I've said, there's always a place for everyone in watershed stewardship. That's my talk.
Thank you, Justine. So can you give us an example of how that CPR dashboard works? Does someone maybe it's an anecdote of an actual project that kind of resulted from it?
So with the watershed CPR dashboard, it's putting forward projects that are either already happening or have happened or have been proposed. So they're not projects that we're leading per se, but it's supposed to be a reflection of work across the watershed to be able to really give a vision of what is happening and how people can get connected. So it's an interactive map and really intended to be used as just decision-making and storytelling tool. So for example, if let's say some sort of ATV club or a recreation club of some kind said, hey, this is a spot that really needs some restoration work and we'd like to put it out there. we would add that as a proposed project to this platform. And then we would be able to see who else is doing work in the area that might be able to connect with them to move this forward. So it wouldn't necessarily be Rivershed that would be standing up and saying, hey, we can help with this, but we could maybe make the connections to be able to support moving the project. And then the idea is to be able to create that vision of what a restored and protected watershed looks like. And then when we're adding new projects, seeing how those pieces all fit together, which then can be an argument or a convincing tool for funders or for government that you might be looking for support.
And how are you building those sort of that bigger vision of what a restored watershed, what that healthy watershed would look like?
We really rely on community. So we're not going in and saying, hey, this is what we think this should look like. We're going to the communities in the Fraser watershed and saying, what have you done? What do you want to do? Let's put this vision. You're the experts. We believe that people that are in the community and connected to the land are the experts. And so reaching out through our networks and also through community events and tabling and things like that to be able to build that out a bit more. But it's an ongoing work in progress. We never really see it as being done. It's the intention is to continue building it and updating it.
Nice. Well, why don't we move on to the Q&A section? So I'll just remind everybody, any questions, pop them in there in that Q&A function. We have a few that came in during registration, and I have a few of my own, and I'll start with those. So maybe I'll start, you can both weigh in on this one. What advice would you give a club wanting to start its own stewardship initiative, but unsure where to begin or who to partner with? We've kind of covered a few of those, and maybe just touch quickly on any kind of common pitfalls or challenges that they should be sort of anticipating right off the hop. Justine, you can go up first.
Well, I'd say if a club is interested in stewardship, the best first step is to look around and see who's already doing work in the watershed or on the river that you're looking at. Often there's First Nations or streamkeeper groups or community organizations that have local knowledge and priorities. So reaching out and starting by listening is a great step, and then figuring out how your members could contribute. I think Neil had a lot of really great examples in his presentation of how different recreation groups are doing that. It can also help to start small and visible. So, getting something moving to try to build momentum, not necessarily thinking, okay, we're going to have to do the whole thing at once and, got to get the full project funding, but be able to start small and build momentum from there. As for pitfalls, I would say the most common one I think that we see is rushing relationships. So we see stewardship as being also about trust and collaboration, not just the technical work. So, wanting to really make sure you take the time to steward those connections and make sure they're long-standing and resilient. And then another challenge I think is thinking of stewardship as like a one-off rather than an ongoing responsibility. So thinking about how the maintenance and monitoring might work for a restoration site. What do you have to do to actually make sure that this is going to be successful, not just as you're doing it, but as thinking about it 5-10 years in the future.
Nice. Neil?
Yeah, I mean, those are you've taken a lot of wind out of my sails, Justine. Those were some really good responses. That I think yeah, understanding the broader context, who else is working in that space is helpful. It also kind of informs where there might be space to work too. So sometimes conversations can actually help, like, modify what you think you're wanting to work on or how you can plug into some existing projects. I would maybe just add, consider your skill set. So like who's on your team and what do they have to offer to bring in? I think that's really important to identify. So then when you're thinking of what you can offer to, and it can be all sorts of things. It could be somebody has skills in like general project management, or somebody is a good communicator, or somebody's an artist, or whatever it is. Like people have, I think, things they like to hone in on and or have that kind of experience, and those are all valuable. I think it's just a matter of figuring out where to plug in. I do agree with Justine though, like listening and understanding it only can improve a project by sort of understanding like other things you might not have considered when you walk into a space. I think in addition to building trust among like the people, it would also be permitting can take a while. So patience is another maybe virtue there, is like knowing that if you're working in and around water, currently there's a lot of regulations around that. And so that gives you time to do some planning ahead of time and just sort of work with people. And if it's your first time doing a project, maybe bring in some expertise would also be helpful. You learn a lot working with people. Sometimes they're willing to give their time, at least for some initial consultation to sort of help you on your way. But I mean, that's with Keegan, for instance, has been doing that work in the North Shore. He was working with engineers, right? Like he had engineers who he had to find the funding to get this, but found funding to hire engineers to give him a design that could work, right? So you can scale up, or you can, and keeping it small is also really good, as Justine mentioned. Like if it's a smaller thing, you're just wanting to get your hands dirty, yeah, definitely start small. But there's value in working with others, bringing them in, getting their input for sure.
I think that touches on a point that I think a lot of people probably in their minds imagine, like you said, water, there's a lot of rules and regulations governing water and what you can do there. Are these projects, I mean, just touch on this quickly, like, are these projects that a group that doesn't have that kind of background, something that they can tackle by going through, with expertise on board? These are things that they can do on their own.
Yes, and I think it's helpful to bring in well, I would say on their own. I'd say like probably uh build some relationships with local like qualified professionals would be probably the best advice. I mean, when engineers get involved, it's often because of risk. There's some sort of human or safety risk component. Uh, there's multiple values on the landscape, so it's important to probably tie in and just sort of get some feedback early. That would even like apply probably to like rec trails and planning. I think you were thinking of, Ryan, like I think yeah, understanding the various value assets that are on a site, and but you can learn a lot, right? I think there's people that have that experience that can probably help you leapfrog over errors that we've all probably encountered in the past, or you learn from mistakes. And so if you can leapfrog over some of those mistakes, I think you're going to keep like your club or your members, really happy to have a successful project, as opposed to running into a bunch of issues down the road too.
Nice. Anything you want to add, Justine, just on that point?
Yeah, and I think that Neil covered it really well, but I can give a bit of an example from our work. We had a landholder that contacted us about the Bell Slough out in Chilliwack, and she and a group were interested in getting something moving and had seen some of our work on the Seshmayam or Salmon River, and brought us in. And we said, well, we're not the experts in the Fraser Valley. So we went and we brought in the Fraser Valley Watersheds Coalition, and we've been talking with the Cham First Nation and the Squaw First Nation and bringing in that collective to move it forward. So it is moving forward now. And they didn't do it on their own, but they were the instigators behind getting it moving along.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think we see this in a lot of recreation projects. You need that champion, that person that's like feels really gung-ho about a project, even if they need to pull in all of these different team members to make it happen. But you need to have that kind of person with that initial vision. You've both sort of touched on the relationship with First Nations, and I know this is something that both of you work on. Can you just touch base or talk a little bit about that and how important that is, and how you've managed to do that to bring First Nations into these conversations, and how recreation groups should think about that relationship building? Go ahead, Justine.
Or I need to unmute. I think I go back to the the trust building and moving at the pace of trust. So, going in with our own ideas can be great, but often nations have a different priority and a lot of competing priorities. So I think just really going in with some of that, the openness to hearing what priorities might be. But yeah, I think it really goes back to that trust piece of making sure that you're doing things in a really intentional way, with humility and a willingness to listen. So, and also to note that each nation not only has their own priorities, but often their own protocols as well. So I think it's really important to ask rather than assume what role a group might be able to play. And so investing in that trust, I think it might seem like a lot at the output to build that relationship and build it in a trusting way, but the outcome will be a lot stronger, and really being up to date, I think, on Indigenous or First Nations rights and title as well, and how those interact with the work that we're doing. So we do have a toolkit actually called the Foodlands Toolkit, which we built from our experience doing the Sheshwayam corridor work, and it has all of our learnings about doing this kind of work with nations. So for folks that are interested in reading a bit more of that, it talks about sort of our pitfalls and where we did our learnings, and wanting to share that to the broader world as well.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll include that in our follow-up resources there when we send out the email. Neil, is there anything you would add to that about the BC Wildlife Federation's work and being inclusive and respectful? Any kind of lessons learned?
Yeah, I think uh, this time in our culture, like it's really hard to do projects without involving First Nations. Like I think it's important, and like the relationship piece is really important in that. I'd probably just add that it can be like some of the communities they're small, they have a lot going on, and sometimes you don't get a response right away. So have patience on that part and continue to like just show the best like side of you and say, just be ready for them because once you get a hold, often they're like, yeah, we're interested in this project. We're just super slammed with a bunch of other things going on. Um, I think, I watched an archaeologist talk a number of years ago, and I was like very tunnel vision, like wetlands are the best thing ever, and we're just going to build as many wetlands as we can in these restored areas. And they talked about, the use of the land before and the archaeological values tied to those in terms of you know uh, what artifacts might be there that tell them the history of their life. And it was like a aha moment for me. I was like, okay, like this archaeologist is looking through this land with a totally different lens. And I appreciated that lens. I was like, this is different. It's not what I had in mind, but it's important that, if a project's going to be successful, that we're like considering the cultural values that are also on that site. And so often I feel like First Nations, that's one of the, like, in addition to environment, I think the archaeological considerations are something they're often quite interested in making sure are not damaged during project development. So we do, yeah, patience is one thing, being like mindful of other values on the land, listening, which Justine mentioned, are all really helpful. And if you're working locally, it's probably easier to at least have just a few communities you need to build those relationships up and yeah, and they'll let you know where they can plug in or not. And yeah, and so yeah, I don't know if I have anything else to add. We have a Indigenous relations person on our team that helps us with being persistent and making those calls and following up and everything. But I honestly, like our whole team, we've told it like it's their responsibility to like be making those relationships happen. So yeah, I'll leave it there for now.
Excellent. Yeah, we could probably have a whole webinar just on that topic. So yeah, let's we'll move over to a question that came in through the registration. How can we better reach youth, schools, and community to be more informed about waterways? Justine, do you want to start on that one?
Yeah, I can jump in. So I think we found that the best way to connect with youth is through experiences. So moving away from like the lecture style of education, So hands-on activities like paddling or habitat restoration or water testing that really create that lasting relationship or connection with the land. So for example, it's our watershed workforce program. It's where we try to do that. We give young people a chance to connect with the river, their watershed that they're in, and then also work alongside knowledge holders and experts to be able to build that fulsome perspective. And then also having accessible tools. So I think tools that are accessible for teachers. I think we all know a teacher, and we all know how much effort and energy and love they put into building things out for their students. And so I think finding things that are accessible for them to be able to implement. So for example, we have a virtual online education program that we developed with Canadian Geographic, and that's one way that we connect with youth. So it's a pretty low barrier for teachers or educators or parents to be able to access, and yeah, creating those opportunities for them.
Nice. Neil?
I think there's probably a huge potential for people that care about have a bit of knowledge to be able to go into schools and talk to teachers and support that. Probably even people on this call right now. I think teachers are overwhelmed. There's lots to touch base on. It's not hard for us to get invited to 100 schools pretty quickly to occupy a child's afternoon or to give a teacher a break. Our challenge is if we have to drive 3 or 4 hours to get to that school, that makes it really hard for our organization to support all the invites we get. But I think at the same time, I agree with Justine, like hands-on is really great. Having activities, it really depends on the age, but I'd say we're still showing adults hands-on and that's what they prefer too. So it's definitely, there's something to that. Yeah, we build wetlands at schools sometimes if we're invited by teachers, basically taking the outdoor classroom to their school ground. Those don't happen all the time. So like otherwise find a local water source and do a field tour with them, be engaging, give them a couple activities. There's lots of great resources out there on how to engage students and just have fun. And I think enjoying is the start to conservation, really. So people will care about things that they interact with and engage with.
Yeah, so true, the experiential education aspect of it. And someone pointed out to me that as children, we do a lot of our learning through play, and it's actually still true as adults. We just forget sometimes to add play to our learning. And so I think it's such a good opportunity to get muddy, like you're talking about in some of your slides there. We had another person ask about rivers as personhood. I'm not sure how familiar or comfortable you feel answering these questions, but they wanted to know, the Magpie River in Quebec was given a personhood. I think some rivers in New Zealand have had this happen as well. Can either of you sort of weigh in on what this is about and why it's why we're looking at doing this and what it brings to the table when we think about stewardship and conservation of rivers?
A stab to start if you want.
Sure.
So granting personhood to a river requires a legal framework that recognizes the river as having its own rights, often with guardians appointed to act on its behalf. Usually this comes from strong local advocacy or collaboration with First Nations and governments that are willing to take a new approach to law. I would say the benefit is more than symbolic, although there is a big symbolic piece to it. And it is intended to shift decisions away from being purely about human use and towards recognizing the river as a living ecosystem. Here in BC, we do have the Environmental Law Centre at the University of Victoria, and they've been partnering with groups like Raincoast Conservation, and they're exploring legal pathways for the Fraser River, including how personhood might work. And so I believe they've got a paper out there that discusses the different opportunities there. That would be way more in the expert realm than I am, but
Neil?
I don't have much to add on this. I think Justine, I don't have a ton of knowledge on the personhood piece. I know that I've seen the person speak from New Zealand on it, and yeah, I'd say that they're definitely leading some of this work right now. So and I think they're invited by a lot of different communities around the world to talk about how they ended up doing that. But yeah, it's interesting. You know, I think the real question is you know, how does that support um these river systems from further protection? I really don't I think this really comes down to a culture of caring as opposed to a law, right? There's a lot of laws that we have that are just on paper and don't actually they're not applied in the real world. So I think it's really more of a societal shift that's going to be making a big difference. Perhaps giving a personhood to the river might support people's thinking over time, and maybe that's where the value added is.
Do you see a shift happening in that perspective, publicly or on that policy side? You know, there's talk of the cumulative impacts in ecosystems more now and things like that. Do you see either side happening?
I hold on to hope. I hold on to hope. And you know, there's cumulative impacts most people have heard about. I like to think, and this is my hopeful mind, is there's cumulative benefits. And there's cumulative benefits if we're working together and sharing ideas and sort of building, you know, repairing some of the damage that's being done. So I think that's what gives me hope and drive. And you know, you do have to work outside of your echo chamber. You have to work outside of, you know, the people that are already bought on and figure out ways to access people that they might not care right now. And how do you make them care? How do you get them involved in this?
Justine, anything to add there?
Yeah, I think that so much of our dialogue now is around that fear-based piece around climate change or, reduce salmon runs, biodiversity loss. And I think sort of building off what Neil said, that focus on hope and that I like the collective impact piece of we can do something. There are things happening. There are people doing this. And I think when we talk about the pessimistic side, and we all know what's happening. We all know climate change is happening, or hopefully we all know. And it's a reality. It's sad. It's scary, but that's not going to motivate people. Fear doesn't motivate people. It's hope and a connection to the land and to the rivers that we're wanting to protect. And I think that there's hope there, and I think there's been a change of dialogue, but I think there's lots more to do.
Yeah. Okay, well, we're getting close to 1 o'clock here, so why don't we wrap up with one final question? Um, Looking to the future, so what factors will impact the relationship between recreation, stewardship, and riversheds in BC? And what new skills or mindsets will we need, you know, whether it's folks like yourselves that are, you know, working right in this, or recreation groups that want to stay involved and kind of look ahead. What would you say are some things that we should be thinking about? Go ahead, Justine.
I think I already said it, and it's climate change, right? We're already seeing a lot more extreme droughts, floods, and wildfires, and these events not only affect the river systems, but also all the landscapes that we recreate and live on. So I think moving in towards more of that mindset of the personhood of the river, even if we don't get there, of how our interactions with the world impact the waters and the lands that we live on as well. I think that's going to be really important, continuing and building on importance as we move forward. And then, of course, another factor is the recognition of Indigenous rights and responsibilities. So really planning recreation, I think, will require a willingness to learn and work alongside First Nations. If that does it already isn't there, I think it is there and along. There's some movement already there, but yeah. So I think that there's the climate change piece and the Indigenous rights and responsibilities, and how those two pieces will impact future recreation and stewardship is going to be huge, and already is huge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Neil?
Um, I'll take a different approach here. I guess because those are really good sort of angles. I look at maybe our current North American or global issue in terms of lack of funding, and like both the federal government and the province, we're seeing shift away from environmental policy right now in a big way, as well as funding on this. So that empty chair picture is unfortunately, it looks like, at least for the short-term horizon, a thing. We can't rely on others to fix this. We're going to need to work together. We're going to need to think about scalability. How do we get the most cost-effective ways of restoring or protecting areas into the future? We need not just professionals. We need everyone to be like working collectively, and people finding their voice to be advocating for this, because there's not going to be a lot of funding to go around on this, but it's going to be really important that society as a whole is advocating, right? And that recreationalists who love what they do and what they see are parts of that voice that can come and collect, and we can work together, because we're going to need to be lockstep working together on these big issues with very little resources coming out of the province or the feds right now. So yeah, I just say, like, yeah, in addition to climate change, working with Indigenous communities, it's yeah, we need to work together. We need to be voices. We need to find our voice and find our skill sets that we can contribute to.
That's a great note to end it on. I'm just going to share my screen quickly here. And unfortunately, it is time to wrap things up. Please keep an eye on your inboxes this week for an email with the recording and takeaways, links, and things like that we've discussed. Thank you all for tuning in, but particularly Justine and Neil for sharing your knowledge and expertise. This webinar is part of a regular series. To find out more about our next webinar topic and everything else the Outdoor Recreation Council is doing, subscribe to the newsletter at orcbc.ca. Finally, please stick around for the survey. It's a great place to let us know about anything you wish we'd cover today or any topics you'd like to see in the future. It will load as soon as I stop talking. With that, I will say goodbye and have a great rest of your day. Thanks again, Neil and Justine, and everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.